All right, guys, so there's something I wanted to make sure I included. I wanted to preface everything in today's video with this little introduction. First of all, if I end up offending you in this video because you have some kind of strange affinity for loving your wireless provider, I don't really care. It makes no sense for people to sit there and defend carriers when they do horrible things to people, when they're so consumer unfriendly, they overcharge, they don't provide, fair opportunities to get their money back and offering services. I just want to say that because AT&T has a history that is riddled with being focused on becoming a monopoly, doing things that are consumer unfriendly, and just straight up evil business activities. So if I offend you and you have a strange affinity for your carrier AT&T, I don't really care. If you choose not to watch any of my videos again because of this, that says more about you than me, because my goal is to tell you guys the truth and unbiased history as it's been documented by all the sales, mergers, acquisitions, and business practices. And that's all I wanted to do. I do hate AT&T. They are full of douchebaggery from the very beginning of time till current times. So if you're cool with that, I'm cool with it. Here's the history. Stick around and enjoy the video. What's going on, guys? It is the SMT, and in today's video we're going to take a look at the history of AT&T. The first edition of the history of was on Verizon. Verizon and AT&T are the nation's two largest carriers. They both have a very rich and deep history that goes back pretty far, and actually they are correlated. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today in the video, but I do want to give you guys forewarning. Make sure that you've set aside some time to watch this video. Because the history goes back so far, this is going to take a little bit of time. This is definitely going to be the longest video that I make in the history of series. I hope you guys got your popcorn ready and got yourself something cold to drink, because we're going to get through the entire history of AT&T. AT&T, we can use several different words to describe them. Words like acquisition, monopoly, buyout, greed, merger, antitrust, conglomerate, cutthroat, anti-competitive, fearless, are all words that we could use to describe AT&T. Regardless of the word usage, I do want to, try my best to give you guys an objective history on the big blue carrier. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the video. First thing I'm going to mention is this video is going to be broken down into sections or segments. The first part will be the deep history dating back into the 1800s on AT&T. The second segment will be kind of the far history that dates back to the 1980s from the initial splitting of AT&T as a company. And then there'll be kind of section 3 where it's a bit of a transition to mobile, and then section 4 or segment 4 will be more of a recent mobile history, and a lot of that will probably sound familiar to a lot of you. A good way to describe AT&T is kind of like the granddaddy of them all. It is a company that dates back so far and has such deep roots in the United States economy, telecommunications, and just overall business. They are obviously one of the most, name brands that we recognize amongst all markets here in the U.S. The history of AT&T actually dates back to 1879 with Bell Company, which was founded by Alexander Graham Bell, which, if you guys think that name sounds familiar, he is the inventor of the first telephone. The company itself was incorporated in 1885. This is where the company Bell was established, and the actual telegraph and telegraph companies were formed. This was the primary and the first company in the U.S. to provide phone services to the nation. The company AT&T is actually a subsidiary of Bell Company, which had the intention of building out and operating the nation's first long-distance telephone network. In 1899, AT&T bought Bell's assets, thus becoming the Bell parent company. And then the Bell Company and AT&T as a whole formed a monopoly, essentially the entire spanning of the 1800s all the way to 1982. It was AT&T for phone services here in the U.S. It was in 1982 that antitrust regulators actually split up the company. AT&T Corporation soon became AT&T Inc. in a direct purchase of the regional Bell operating company, aka Southwestern Bell, back in 2005. Now, the whole history of pre-1982 is all AT&T and Bell purchasing competitors. Basically, antitrust regulators constantly had to intervene with these business ventures and eventually created documents and agreements to prevent AT&T and Bell companies from continuing these behaviors. Even after this, there were a lot of wink-wink agreements with AT&T and its competitors to lock down segments and regions of the US, trying to eliminate and minimize competition. So this affected pricing and innovation as well. Consistently throughout the history, you'll see that regulators were always having to intervene on pricing, equipment, different services for consumers. AT&T always claimed natural monopoly. I'd actually never really heard reference to that word, but of course, leave it to AT&T to think about this, right, and develop that idea. Their claim was all of their offerings and pricing were fair, as well as the services, them being an all-in-one company, one-stop shop that could do it all for people, and everything was kosher. In January of 1982, the US versus AT&T, Ma Bell, which a lot of people would refer to this, agreed to divest after 8 years of litigation. And the result was 7 companies, 7 baby bells, which essentially, they wanted to, figure something else out for the business since they were being split up. In exchange for this deal, AT&T wanted in on the computer business. So something really interesting I wanted to share with you guys. When I was doing the research on this, I found a letter that was actually posted in AT&T's headquarters after they were forced to split up by US government regulations back in the 1980s. They posted this for their employees to see, and it shows you just how arrogant, cocky, and truly amazing how this company was and how steadfast they were on trying to be unregulated. Take a look at what this sign had. By splitting up Ma Bell into the 7 baby bells, AT&T no longer had telephone hardware locked down. They were no longer running a monopoly. Pretty much regulators did what they had to do to split up the company. So now AT&T had to compete. Companies like MCL, which I fondly remember, as well as Sprint, all involved in calling and specifically being able to offer services in long distance calling. In 1991, AT&T actually discontinued telegraph services. AT&T computers, their computer foray actually ended up failing and fizzling. And the 1990s, there were so many different spin-offs, so many mergers and acquisitions. NCR was divested, Lucent was created. Some of you may remember them from Business Enterprise for telephone services. And this was all due to the deregulation, which improved markets for consumers, getting them more options, better pricing, and improved services. In 1994, AT&T actually purchased Macaw Cellular, the nation's largest provider at that time. The purchase was for $11.5 billion, and I believe that the company did have 2 million subs. This is kind of the first foray into cellular operations. In 1997, AT&T hired former IBM executive C. Michael Armstrong with, the intention to kind of dominate the dot-com era. The focus was on internet, cable assets, TV assets. They ended up acquiring TCL and Media One. TCL acquisition was $48 billion, and they did so all in stocks. And the Media One purchase was for $54 billion, which was in combination of cash and stocks, where they actually outbid Comcast for Media One. And then in 1999, AT&T bought out IBM outright for $5 billion. And if you think about it, the debt really must have been piling up at this time. AT&T had to shift from kind of the long distance calling focus to more of a mobile focus based on where the market was going. So that kind of wraps up the first segment of the deep history of AT&T and how they kind of ended up getting into wireless. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an ad here as we take a break. And we're back, and this is going to be the second segment of today's history of AT&T. So after this complete overhaul in October of 2000, many of the segments of AT&T as a company really started to diversify. In July of 2001, AT&T wireless services were official. It was the end of 2001 where we actually even saw AT&T broadband, which also provided Liberty Media and cable TV services to AT&T customers. It was at this time that AT&T made the purchase of where Comcast bought AT&T Broadband in 2002. In 2004, AT&T Wireless merged with Singular. At, I believe, the time, and this may actually still be true, this was the biggest merger of its type. It was named Singular until 2007, and then it was shifted over to AT&T Mobility, which is how we refer to it currently. In 2004, the U.S. government eliminated equal access regulations for long-distance companies to access all of the Bell Sisters companies' assets at fixed rates. This was kind of a big deal in terms of regulation. And AT&T subsequently shifted away from residential telecom business completely, shifting to voice over broadband internet, which they called AT&T Call Vantage. Things start to get really interesting in 2005 when SBC was named from the Southwestern Bell acquisition of AT&T. Then SBC, which was the regional Bell operating company, the cellular and paging business of AT&T from the 80s and 90s. They shifted from St. Louis over to a San Antonio headquarters, and there was a purchase of Cox Cable and Hauser Communications. SBC took over Southern New England Telephone Company in 1998, and then SBC and Ameritech merged in May of 98, later sold to GTE. And then SBC was obviously a massive formation of mergers and acquisitions from the very beginning. In fact, the biggest RBOC until the Bell Atlantic GT merger. In 1999, SBC purchased Comcast for $1.7 billion and its $1.3 billion debt, putting it at a total purchase of about $3 billion. Let's go back to 2005 and SBC. SBC bought AT&T Corporation for $16 billion. The FCC cleared it, the DOJ cleared it, and obviously they were kind of together on this. AT&T's name still remained. It was still AT&T Inc., not AT&T Corp. And then SBC was the new AT&T, which is where we get the AT&T Mobility history from. In 2006, AT&T purchased Bell South for $86 billion. It kept the AT&T name. And then at this point, Singular, which bought AT&T Wireless back in 2004, as well as YellowPages.com, had all of the AT&T branding. Modern AT&T, dating back to 2007, is where we see current CEO, Randall Stevenson, as kind of the person that kind of ushered in the wireless generation of AT&T. Other segments of the business that really started to flourish: Uverse, video share, high-speed internet in rural America. They had this huge initiative. They ended up buying Dobson Company, which I think was like this Interwise or Enterprise company. And in 2007, AT&T purchased 12 megahertz of 700 megahertz spectrum from Aloha Partners for $2.5 billion. This appeared to clearly be the indication that wireless was going to be their focus. They acquired Edge Wireless, a regional GSM carrier in the Pacific Northwest, in 2008. And then in 2007, Dobson Cellular/Cellular One. In 2008, Continental Communications Corp., which was a share with Verizon. And then in 2008, they had the Wayport purchase, which was this collection of internet hotspots throughout the nation. And then in 2011, AT&T bought $2 billion in spectrum assets from Qualcomm, which I think was being used by Flow TV. And of course, they ended up refarming this to LTE on AT&T. That wraps up the recent mobility history, kind of the near history. And I think we'll take another break, so there will be an ad placed here. And now we're back for the final stretch of this edition of the history of AT&T. We made it up to 2011. This was a big year for AT&T because of the attempted merger between AT&T and T-Mobile, which a lot of people claim was more of an acquisition than an attempted merger. And I actually agree with that. Now, ultimately, the merger did fail, and everybody will look back at that and say, what could have been? What would have happened to the wireless industry? What would have happened for AT&T? They'd be bigger than Verizon. What would have happened to T-Mobile? What would have happened to pricing across the nation? I mean, the history of wireless telecoms could have been completely rewritten if things would have worked out differently back in 2011. In the comment section below, if you guys want me to do a video on the 2011 failed merger/acquisition of T-Mobile by AT&T, I'll do a complete recap of that. I think it would be interesting. Obviously, it has connection to today's proposed merger of T-Mobile and Sprint. So if you guys want that, just go ahead and let me know in the comment section if that's something that you'd be interested in me doing. But as a brief recap of that merger, $39 billion would have been the purchase price from Deutsche Telekom, giving T-Mobile access and control by AT&T. At the time, T-Mobile had 34 million subscribers. It would have given AT&T like a huge market share. It would have put them way past Verizon. AT&T CEO Randall Stephenson obviously had his own claims, saying that it was going to help out network quality, it was going to give savings to the company, and all of that may be true, but it was going to be horrible for customers. I think it's pretty clear that AT&T has always wanted full control of everything in the segments that they operate in. Monopolies. What's interesting about that failed merger is there were a lot of people actually on board with it. A lot of companies were supporting it. A lot of people had, supporting it from many different industries. It was just interesting to see that no matter how much support that the merger was receiving, obviously pushing by AT&T and trying to influence people's thoughts and ideas on this, and it still failed. Now, ultimately, the DOJ did sue to block that merger. They clearly saw it as an antitrust issue. The FCC also denied it. They were concerned about pricing. They were concerned about job losses and the job market, and all those things are legitimate. We obviously know those are serious concerns when it comes to any merger, including the T-Mobile and Sprint merger that we see today. What ended up happening as a result of the failed merger, T-Mobile got $3 billion in termination fees and $1 billion in spectrum assets out of the failed deal. So, in other words, T-Mobile actually was boosted. They leveled up from the failed merger. They got some stuff out of AT&T, and that ended up probably being one of the reasons why they're so successful today. They were able to improve their network infrastructure, gain market share, and become a much stronger and viable company today. In 2013, AT&T ended up buying Leap Wireless, which would eventually become Cricket. The acquisition was for $1.2 billion. They were receiving Leap Wireless's towers, their stores, and 5.3 million consumers. And then moving forward in 2014, they ended up buying DirecTV for $48.5 billion with $19 billion in debt. That purchase set them back $67 billion. It was at this time that AT&T started to focus on pay TV. The deal forced AT&T to build out fiber for 4 years as a stipulation of the agreement. 12.5 million customers would be getting this fiber rollout. No discrimination on online services, no discrimination for low-income consumers. They'd have to help with rural and those types of situations. Very recent history, just the last couple of years. In 2016, we have the Time Warner merger / acquisition, $109 billion, billion with a B. HBO, Turner, Warner Brothers, all those types of services were now, property of AT&T. The FCC actually declined to review the oversight, and they ended up just leaving it to the DOJ. And the DOJ, which we're very familiar with now following the T-Mobile and Sprint merger, Makin Delrahim specifically, said to AT&T that you must sell DirecTV or Turner. You couldn't have both. CEO Randall Stephenson told him, hell no, we're not getting rid of anything. And actually the DOJ sued to block the deal. The DOJ actually ended up losing, and their merger was approved as recent as last year. So now we have what AT&T calls Warner Media. Very profitable segment of the company. They did very, very well last quarter in 2019. For the most recent highlights, we know that AT&T is doing a lot with 5G services. They're going to be offering sub-6 gigahertz spectrum. They're going to be offering millimeter wave. They've got the whole 5G evolution, nonsense going on right now. But their network is doing very, very well. Speeds have been fantastic. They've got the Band 14 first responders network really bolstering their network. So from the mobility side, AT&T is very strong. Their market share is very high. Their performance is very good. Although maybe their pricing isn't to everybody liking, they do offer a solid network. And their history has always been that. Offer the best that they can do at a premium price, try to corner the market and monopolize, and be a superpower. That's something that AT&T has been doing since day one, and they've always kind of took that MO. I know the video was long, but we finally got through it. I want to thank you guys for taking this opportunity to watch the SMT history of mini-series, this one for AT&T. That pretty much wraps it up. If you guys want to leave a comment from anything that I mentioned in today's video, maybe I forgot something, maybe I de-emphasized, or maybe I need to emphasize something that I just glanced over. Maybe you guys experienced something as a consumer in the past. Go ahead and chime in. Drop me a line below in the comment section. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on this topic. I want to give a big shout out to the Discord community. Also a big shout out to the patrons over on Patreon. Thank you guys for your continued support. There are links in the description box below for both of those communities. And if you would like to help support the SMT YouTube channel with a monetary donation, whether small or occasional, I'll put a link in the description for a PayPal link. And if you'd like to make those considerations, thank you so much for those kind and generous donations. Keep production here on the SMT going. That wraps it up for this video. I think the next one I'll do is the history of T-Mobile. If you guys want to see that, go ahead and like this video, share this video, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and make sure that you bell notify yourself so you never miss an upload from the SMT YouTube channel. Thank you guys again for watching. New subscribers, old subscribers, all viewers, thank you guys so much once again. I am the SMT, and I will see you guys on the next video. Peace.